Morning, everyone. Welcome to our fourth session in our seminar series on neurodiversity in the workplace. It is fabulous to see you all. We are recording this session, and in fact, our three earlier sessions have also been recorded. They're available on our website and through YouTube if you want to go and have a look at any of those that you have missed. Seminar 1, we looked at what is neurodiversity. Seminar 2, we looked at the sort of perceived barriers and the actual barriers for engaging neurodiverse staff within the workplace. Session 3, we looked at lifting those barriers and removing the fear. And in this session, we wanted to have a really sort of discursive session about lessons learned. We're going to be looking at, you know, what have we as individuals who work within this field come across in real life, and what our sort of main lessons learned are. We'd really love you to post comments and questions in the chat function rather than the Q&A function, and we will pick up as many questions as we can at the end. We've got a fifth session which we're going to record, which will address some of the questions that have been asked during the course of our seminars, to sort of draw it all together and make sure that we address all the questions that have been raised. We're going to speak for hopefully 30 or 40 minutes and then take some questions after that. I'm going to introduce all of our speakers. We have Gillian and Jack from Inclusive Environments Limited, Liz Norman from Elizabeth Norman Limited. She's going to join us any minute now. She's been having some technical issues, but she will join us as soon as she can, and myself. I am Linky Trott. I head up the employment team at Edwin Co. It's a full service law firm. We frequently act for individuals and companies that are navigating their way through the obligations and the benefits that they have under the Equality Act, particularly in relation to disability. My pronouns are she and her. My values are honesty, transparency, and empathy. And I will hand over to Gillian. Liz will join us when she can. Oh, well, let's go to Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Fitzpatrick. I'm the co-founder of Inclusive Environments Limited. I'm a person with lived experience and I've just completed my BA Honours degree in Education Studies and Inclusion at Liverpool John Moores University. I identify as being neurodiverse as I have a diagnosis of autism and dyspraxia from the age of 3 years old. My pronouns are he and him. My values are honesty, integrity, and being inclusive. And I'll hand over to Gillian.
Thanks, Jack. So hi, that's a very old picture of me, probably over 30 years ago. I qualified as an architect, and I read recently that to be a good architect, you have to love people, because architecture is an applied art and deals with the framework of people's lives. And I thought that was so true, especially in relation to the sort of seminar series that we're doing. My pronouns are she and her. I've worked delivering all types of architecture over many years, from Hindu temples to performing arts centres and workplaces. And I'm really concentrating now with Jack on inclusive environments for people that are neurodiverse. And part of that is because of a personal story, which I will tell you later. My values are caring, patience, and empathy.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry that we haven't got Liz with us yet, but she will join us when she can. Oh, is she here already? Oh, fabulous, fabulous. Welcome, Liz. Liz, shall we just jump back and ask you to introduce yourself?
So, yes, sorry I'm late. I had technical problems. Yes, I run a recruitment company in the world of insight, which is closely related to data analytics, which is an area that has employed quite a lot of neurodiverse people. Although actually I have to say in insight, it's still not something that we're doing regularly. So it's an area of real interest to me. I am dyslexic myself, so I'm interested in it personally. And my values are knowledgeable, empathetic, collaborative, progressive, and curious, very curious about this area.
Thank you, Liz. Welcome, welcome. So we thought that we would kick off by asking each of us to just give an example of a sort of an issue that has arisen that they've come across in real life, IRL, and how it has been addressed in terms of neurodiversity. And Gillian, I wondered if I could kick off with you and ask you for a real life example.
Yes, certainly. So in 2019, I actually had a stroke at the start of 2019 in February. And then I had a second stroke in July, actually in the office, and I was diagnosed with an incurable brain tumour. It made me sort of realise some of the symptoms that I've been having to date. But what came out of that was a very quick understanding that although I designed workplaces going over sort of 20 or 30 years, I hadn't really thought about people with invisible disabilities. And the key example for that is that I was going to a meeting, like we all do, in somebody else's office. You arrive there 15 minutes before you need to be there, so you can use the washroom and freshen up. So I'd asked to go to the washroom, and the signposting had taken me deep into the core of the building. And I turned around and realised that the signposting was only in one direction. There were 2 or 3 doors going out. I had no idea which door to take. I had no idea what corridor I'd be going through and into once I'd taken that. And to be honest, I got a little bit panicky that if I had a seizure or something in that space, then no one would find me. So it was just that understanding that just something simple like wayfinding could actually change somebody's life. And so that's when we started the sort of the research and our journey. And also because of that, I found Jack. So I'm going to hand over to Jack next.
Hi, so an example from my practice over the years is when I was in education, I had many challenges that I faced from my diagnosis, but with the right support and infrastructure around me, people have enabled me to get to where I am today, to completing my degree and further study maybe. And so an example from when I was in education was I was at Birkenhead Sixth Form College studying my A levels, and towards the end of nearing the exams, I was approached to apply for head student, the equivalent of head boy. And during the application process, the board decided that that a different role would be more suited to me, representing all the students with additional needs due to my diagnosis of autism and dyspraxia. And so part of this was continually getting feedback from the students to see what was happening and if there was any points for improvement. And a partially sighted young boy came up to me on his first couple of days at the college and said to me, "I can't do this. I can't see the menus in the cafeteria because the font is too small and it's disorientating me and getting me stressed." And so this is a quick win for organisations in which through this piece of feedback, I then went to the special educational needs coordinator of the college, who then said, "You need to speak with marketing to see what we can do for his preferences." And they changed the font, enlarged it to A2 format, and also changed it to his own colour preferences because he was dyslexic as well. And this simple quick win really made an impact, a significant impact to this young person, who took over the role once I finished college, and he was very, very successful as well, and managed to get the A levels that he needed to get into university. So this small impactful change can really help individuals. Yeah, so that was when barriers were removed, he was enabled to fulfill his full potential. I'll pass over to Liz.
Hi, I've mentioned that in the whole data analytics space, They have been looking at how to employ neurodiverse people for quite a long time. And the main reason for that, frankly, is because they were so short of staff. They just did not have enough programmers and data analysts, and they could see that there were some very well qualified people who weren't employed, and that was because they were neurodiverse. So that sort of drove them to thinking, okay, so what can we do to support these people in the workplace? And there are lots of recruitment examples that I could cite, small things that people have done within recruitment to enable those people into the workplace. But when I was looking at it yesterday, I was interested that SAP, which is one of the companies that has been running a program for longest, so they started their program in 2015, looking at supporting people into the workplace. And all the studies that they have done have said that it's actually adaptive functioning which has made the biggest impact across the business. Adaptive functioning is physical things like signposts from the loo and lighting and all those sorts of things, but it's broader than that. It's actually thinking about everything that you need to do to enable people to do well and to reach their full potential. And a lot of that is about things like coaching and management. It's communication, it's all of those sorts of things. And they firmly believe that this single focus has enabled them to be very successful. They now employ more than 1% of neurodiverse people generally across the business. They're getting to a point where they think they might even abandon their program because it's such an integral part of what they do that they don't need to have a special program anymore. And it's interesting that you sort of see articles by managers within the business who believe that the training that they've had in this area actually makes them better managers. You know, having to think about how to enable all to succeed, despite the fact that we're all slightly different, we learn in slightly different ways, has actually made them better managers overall, not just managers of neurodiverse people. So yeah, that's my one success story. I hope that helps, Linky.
No, it's really interesting, and picking up on that point about making better managers, I think that I had a client who created, it was a US client, and they created these kind of, codes of ethics, which included the statement that you approach your colleagues with empathy, which is why that's one of my core values, because I can see it makes such a difference if your starting point is that everybody is trying to do their best, and you just have to work out what the issues are in doing their best. And if you can manage to address those, then that's the sort of key to unlocking the success. And I always go back to a case I think I mentioned in session 2, where you had this employee who was in a sort of open plan environment and was sat with their back to a kind of corridor where there was a lot of sort of traffic going on, and the lighting was terrible. They preferred natural lighting. They had particular sensitivity, understanding that some people with autism, they can hear the sort of the halogen light bulbs. They have this hypersensitivity to it, and so for them, it's having empathy and understanding that. And once you understand those issues and you move this person to a different space and adjust their workplace environment, if they've been moved to a desk next to the window and away from a corridor, this person would have really succeeded. And actually they didn't. There were a sort of consistent number of failings. They just sort of got a bit annoyed with them and thought that they weren't really sort of making an effort and making a fuss. and that was a real lack of empathy. And as a result, of course, it all went pear-shaped and resulted in quite a substantial employment tribunal claim. So I think that sort of making better managers point is absolutely key. I mean, in real life, examples. I think a lot of us in our families have individuals who have particular sort of challenges in areas. I've got a dyslexic nephew. And what he tells me is that he needs to be able to change the font on something. He needs to be able to distinguish between words in tests and that sort of thing. So don't use, which is true and which is not true. That's very easy for somebody who's dyslexic to miss, particularly under stressful environments. Use completely different words like true and false. And it's just having some understanding of that. But that was a bit of an eye-opener for me in terms of a real life example. So yeah. I'm sorry, Liz, I'm interrupted.
No, I was just going to say that I was tempted to say, to give a real example of communication, because that's also important, but it sort of ties into this adaptive functioning and management. But you're right, it's empathy and also communication. It's essential.
And the other thing I think that we all wanted to look at today was to sort of summarising our takeaways from what we've all sort of learned and understood over the process, to have a look at what we might describe it as the single biggest change that employers can do. It's really difficult to distill it into one thing, but Gillian, I'm going to set that task for you. What do you think is the single biggest change that employers can make? Oh, you're on mute, Gillian.
You're on mute.
I think we've all alluded to it around communication, and I think the biggest single change is around listening to people, and really true listening, sort of really understanding what they're going to say. So some people have sort of divulged, as Jack and I have been doing these complementary work sessions, what's been really nice is that some people have actually divulged during the session that they have a diagnosis to their colleagues. So actually being able to listen and create a culture where people feel safe and they feel listened to, they feel empathy, and they don't mind disclosing. I think when I first started looking into this area, the disclosure rate, that 59% of people actually regretted disclosing to their employer, really was very impactful for me. And in fact, when I mentioned to my previous employer, my ailment, they actually said, well, you don't need to tell anybody. And I absolutely do, because I could have a seizure or a stroke at any time. So listening and really let people sort of talk about what their needs are, what their strengths are, to create this sort of inclusive culture where people feel really comfortable both listening and learning from each other. So I think that's the single biggest change that I would say, listen.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask about, Gillian, particularly with your sort of architectural background, is it's all, I think increasingly we're moving to these sort of open plan workspaces and that sort of thing. And I just wondered, some employers would find it quite challenging to sort of create these adaptive workspaces for individuals. I sort of say, well, for the individual in the case that I referenced, move them to a window with natural light. And, employers in practice might find that quite difficult. And I just wondered if there were sort of easy fixes in terms of the environment that you could recommend.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Jack and I have been doing a series of interviews actually with people that are neurodiverse and talking them through the different changes, both sort of virtually and face-to-face. And as you say, a lot of organisations now are looking at a more sort of hybrid activity-based workplace. And what we've heard is, exactly as you alluded to, you have that one person that almost has one seat that they need to sit in. And it's not just because of the surrounding environment, but a lot of people actually have their set up a certain way. and they have their sticky notes and they have their boards, and they allude to them every day, and to have to take it down and put it up not only takes time when they have other routines that they need to do anyway, but also it might not go back exactly the same way. It might actually then empower them. So what we actually sort of have suggested to some organisations who don't want to single individuals out again as having an adaptation is they've changed their booking system. So not just short-term booking, but also people can do the long-term booking of the different spaces, which I think is a nice idea, because again, it doesn't say I'm different, I need this particular adaptation, but anybody now can actually book a desk for more than one day and leave the stuff up around the desk if they want to. So that's one that the organisation has done specifically to enable individuals that might have particular needs. Another thing I would say with organisations now, and going back to the work, and I do like the fact that we are thinking about different types of environments, is actually create a sanctuary space. You know, if it doesn't have to cost a lot, repurpose a meeting room that you have, you know, add in maybe curtains, put a dimmer switch on the light, or put a sort of uplighter with a dimmer switch in there, freestanding uplighter, allow people to go into that space and maybe take in their noise cancelling headphones. They can listen to their own music, turn the lights down. But you know, we all have this now when we're traveling by tube again, and we get into the office and we're completely frazzled and we just need a place to go to decompress. So, you know, having those types of spaces would be a quick fix for organisations.
Noise cancelling headphones as well. I mean, you know, now that you mention it, that it's a very quick and easy fix, isn't it? It's, you know.
Yeah.
Jack, can I move on to you? What you might describe as the single biggest change?
Yeah, so this stems from my experience slightly before I met Gillian. I was working with a construction company called Aggregate Industries, which I referenced before in previous seminars. But what they did is they set up multiple different affinity groups: age, gender, ethnicity, race, sexuality, and disability. And as part of the disability group I'm part of now, they asked for a call for proposals, and so I put a proposal forward, which, in case other people don't know, is a
you're breaking up actually.
Oh, sorry. That people
No,
who are
Jack, we're losing you, so I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
I wonder would it help if we maybe switch videos off? Sometimes that can help with the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Does that help?
You're coming through loud and clear, Jack.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the biggest changes that happened within the company was the Sunflower Guns and Disabilities. It started at Heathrow Airport in 2016, Heathrow and Gatwick actually, and has been rolled out internationally now. It's a discrete queue for people who have unseen and hidden disabilities, and has now been rolled out across their organisation with great effect to higher disclosure rates, and is being used effectively to get people to disclose. The affinity groups also that I mentioned have been really effective, getting employees and groups of people together who are to create and include them in the decision making and create change that is very effective across the organisation.
And Jack, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Linky.
I just wonder, I mean, I love the idea of the sunflower lanyard, which is a sort of, you know, subtle but outward and visible sign. And I just wondered what is the sort of expected response when you see someone with a lanyard? Is it just that it is to sort of say, look, then, you know, you've got to be alive to the fact that I might have different needs?
Yes, so in regards to that, it's about an education and training piece for the organisation. It's making employees aware and have impactful conversations with them, which are honest and genuine, to say, I actually see them wearing the sunglasses.
I think they're amazing, and just to give an example, because I know Jack, your speech is going in and out a little bit. People that I've come across wearing them, they really like the fact that you talk about it with them. Oh, yeah, I know what that is. It's sunflower lanyard, and they say, oh yes, no, it's just people. It's amazing. Since I've worn it, people come up and they know that I need a little bit of time to understand. I need a little bit more empathy. They might need to explain things a different way. So it's that visual sign just to say, look, yeah, I'm slightly different. And I think a lot of people then have shown them more empathy and understanding. There is another lanyard that's white, and you can actually become an ally of people with neurodiverse abilities as well. But yeah, when I've seen them used and when I've spoken to people, at first I thought people might not want to wear them because it's singling them out. Actually, when you talk to them, it stopped them having to mask, and it's actually enabled their lives to be a lot more fulfilled.
That's really interesting. Sorry, I find that interesting, because I wondered that whether people would be wary of that, because you have to have that cultural change before people feel confident of, you know, even admitting that they're neurodiverse. So there's really nobody that's wary. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
it's about creating honest and you know, impactful conversations towards people who are neurodiverse, who have additional needs, and inventories right across the organisation, and train them to understand and have and give people a little bit more time to understand and process the information.
I think the other thing that I think is fabulous about them is that it encourages sort of disclosure in quite a gentle way. And I think it's a sort of chicken and egg, isn't it? Yes, the employer needs understanding, but, you know, that statistic, Gillian, you mentioned about, you know, 53% of people regretted disclosing. In some ways, it's a pull and a push, isn't it? In that I think that people need to start disclosing, to normalize it, because part of the problem is the invisibility of it. And yet, actually, it's amazing when you talk to people, they've always got an example of somebody who has similar challenges in their own, you know, friendship group or family life. You know, it's incredibly common. So I just think it, you know, anything that can encourage disclosure helps normalize the fact that we have these diversities and that we need to start understanding them. Liz, can I come to you then for your single biggest change?
Well, my single biggest change is literally just jump in and go for it. And actually going back to Jack's point and the lanyards, I think there is a lot of fear. I think a lot of people don't, you know, they just don't want, they just don't know where to start. And you're right. I have a neighbour who I noticed was wearing a lanyard this week. And I always chat to her. And while I was chatting to her, I realised that she had the lanyard on. And I thought, oh, I would have never guessed. I've no idea in what way she's neurodiverse, but I would have never guessed. And then it made me realise, as you say, that it just sort of normalises it. It makes me, because I think a lot of people think, oh my goodness, you know, where would I start? You know, what could somebody with autism do, or you know, Down syndrome? And I mentioned that because I noticed HSBC has recently had a program of employing people like that in the branch. Where do I start? So the first thing I would say is just overcome that fear, jump in and give it a go. Because if you do, well, I have to say, as somebody who has got quite involved in this in the last 6 months, it's it's actually really fascinating. It's really interesting. It does help you with all sorts of issues. And in the end, there are lots of examples of where this has made a huge improvement to organizations. It's made it much easier for them to recruit. It's led to greater productivity, improved retention of employees, innovation. There's been a lot of innovation by having a more neurodiverse workforce. I know, again, going back to SAP, one of the examples that they gave is that somebody with autism thought of a completely new way of approaching a problem, which saved them $40 million US. So there's lots of great reasons to do it, but you've got to give it a go.
What was that? What was it that saved them $14 million? Do you know the specifics?
It was something to do with some automation or technical change.
Yeah.
I can't actually remember the specific details, but it was something like that they introduced.
Yeah.
And yeah, that saved them that sort of money.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of simple thing, really. I mean, there are all sorts of detail that you could go into, but you've just got to give it a start. You've got to.
Well, it's very similar. If we go to the next slide, which touches on what I think the single biggest change is, which is the sort of rather more negative. That's a lawyer for you. Flip side of exactly what you've said, Liz, is I often find that employers are like a rabbit in the headlights. You know, they just feel the fear, and you know, it's the sort of issue of, well, jump in anyway. And for me, the single biggest change is that education piece, because I think once you understand it, once you understand what it is, once you understand what the needs are and how to address them and what your legal obligations are, it's not so scary. You know, in fact, I think it can help the wider organization, because although they're very specific diagnosis of neurodiversity and those who, you know, may be regarded legally to be suffering from a disability, actually these are all changes. Everybody is in some way neurodiverse, to a lesser or a greater extent, and they're all changes which can help people. The thing that I've really understood during the course of the research that we've been doing and the discussions we've been having for this is, you know, things like training. And it's so common that employers just put some online training out, and actually, you know, that may not be the best way for somebody to learn a new IT process or a new, you know, telephone system. You know, here's your new telephone and here's a booklet. You know, and for some people, you know, neurodiverse or not, actually it's just not the way they learn with a booklet. So I think it just has a much broader benefit to a wider organization to think much more broadly about how you adapt different learning processes. But my single biggest change is education and understanding.
So I think that sort of almost brings it full circle to the sort of the listening, the education, and the idea of retention, to just a story that I was reminded of. This organisation had actually made it their policy to bring in people that were more neurodiverse because of certain roles and thought processes. And they brought in one person, and they sort of had the conversation with HR, but that actually didn't actually go down to their line manager. So once they'd actually moved to their particular department and started working, it was after about 3 months, and the manager thought, this just isn't working, you know, I can't. And instead of just giving them their notice, they thought, well, we're going to sit down and really try to understand. And one thing that I will say on this is that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. All of these neurodiverse conditions we're talking about are all different. And they sat down with the person and started really listening and talking to them. And it turned out that they were giving them loads and loads of information to do, almost like a week's worth of tasks. And the person just didn't know where to start. They didn't know how long to take on each task. They didn't know how to prioritize. They had a bit of an issue with that sort of time management, and I can go off and get too creative and be exactly the same. So I totally understand. And so after that, they decided to give that person chunks of work in 45-minute chunks. And that person has now become their best worker. They're more efficient, they're happier, they're likely to stay there longer just because that conversation. So not only is it about sort of bringing people in at the beginning, but I think it's also that sort of continuity, so that change and engagement and the training piece that goes alongside it.
Absolutely. The other thing we wanted to look at, just as part of sort of wrapping up, is help and guidance, and sort of signposting to people where they may be able to get additional help and guidance. And in fact, one initiative that we're all going to do as a group is to roll out a sort of 14-day or 21-day challenge. We're going to develop it where we just send out to those who are interested and want to sign up some interesting articles or videos, just to dip into, and you sort of undertake to do it for, you know, the period of the challenge, you know, 1 or 2 a day. We'll send you interesting links, and we'll sort of signpost that in a bit more detail following these seminars. But I think, can I start with you, Gillian, as to where you might recommend some help and chat and guidance?
Yeah, certainly. So, well, one thing is that Jack and I, as part of a Profit for Purpose, the organisation we set up, Inclusive Environments, we are offering people sort of one-to-one interviews. And so they're almost like working coaching sessions. So anyone can approach Jack and I if they want to take part in our research. I also have put 3 books down here. I love books. And so one of them I would suggest, Neurodiversity at Work, is a brilliant book to read for anyone wanting to understand more about, you know, what neurodiverse means, how it affects organizations, what you can do to increase performance. It has training, it has coaching in there, but it's really easy and good read. And I've used mine as a textbook. I've written notes all over it. So that's one. The Neurodiverse Workplace, that's a very small book, so quite quick to get through. Again, I'd recommend that. And The Divergent Mind is really around women that are neurodiverse thriving in the world, because they have different symptoms, just like males in certain areas. There's a lot in the news recently about how they mask and haven't necessarily been diagnosed with ADHD as the male population has. So another good book. Mind is a very good organisation. If you go onto their website, you can navigate to different resources, as is the Autism at Work programme by the National Autistic Society. A lot of resource there, and the Dyslexia Association. But I think it's difficult to get all these down, so we will put them in our 21-day challenge. Jack, I'm not sure if your sound is okay, so I'll hand over to you and we'll see how you go.
Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. So from a personal perspective, I've just completed my degree. And as part of this, Student Finance England, when I'm applying for my maintenance grant and for my finances, offered disability student allowance. Now, DSA is a very, very important resource that has been so helpful to me through having mental health mentors, academic mentors, equipment such as the laptop that I'm talking on today, assistive technology, and all of that is included within a needs assessment once you've gone through the initial process with student finance. And I was reading that the statistics are very, very low for disclosure when putting this, when going through the student finance route, and therefore lots of people don't get diagnosed or get the support that they need during their degree.
I was amazed, Jack, when you told me about this, that you know, you're somebody who has a diagnosis, and yet this wasn't signposted to you.
No.
It sort of seemed almost accident, not design, that you got to find out about Student Finance England. And I mean, it's shameful, isn't it? But there's this sort of money that's available and should be applied for.
And it's thousands of pounds as well, depending on the severity of the disability. For instance, if you need personal assistance, they'll even help with some maintenance costs associated with them living in with you. And it's just a fantastic scheme. But the Office for Students has said that it was as low as 10% disclosure. This was as of 2019. They wrote a very interesting report. Again, that'll be in our 21-day challenge when we put that in there. Because it's so important to highlight this. I found out through the disability coordinator at my sixth form college that I mentioned earlier. It just didn't, you know, it's by pure chance that I found out, because your educational healthcare plan, the EHCP, currently for education, runs out when you go into higher education. And this is basically the same level of support as what I was getting, if not more. And it's just such a useful asset. Another organisation that I have heard of, haven't had direct experience with it, but is Remploy. They do careers mentoring and guidance schemes and different things like that for people with disabilities, and some major businesses and organisations use it. And the final thing that I was going to highlight is the Disability Confident scheme. Now, when I was working with Aggregate Industries, as I mentioned earlier, they went from Disability Confident Committed to Disability Confident Employer. And the final step is Disability Confident Leader. Now, that is through an external independent assessment that somebody comes in and reviews all of the paperwork that you submitted for Committed and Employer. And it's an amazing accreditation scheme to show that you're committed and dedicated to the equality, diversity and inclusion cause, particularly the aspect of disability. I hope everyone could hear that. Yeah.
I've not heard of them, and it'd be really interesting to look into. And of course, I think, as I sort of outlined in seminar 1, there's a sort of carrot and a stick approach. I mean, the carrot approach is, you know, these are incredibly capable and hardworking, loyal employees, and you must embrace them because they make a difference to your bottom line. Maybe not always 14 billion, but or billion, but nonetheless they make a difference. And then there's you know, the sort of negative lawyer stick approach, which is increasingly on tenders and that sort of thing. You're being asked about this, and people are wanting to align and work with organisations which share their values, and this is one of them. And you're going to be asked about it in the same way that you are other diversity statistics. Liz, can I hand over to you about any additional help and guidance?
Can I just second what you say? As a recruitment consultant, reputational advantage is, you know, it does make a massive difference if you are accredited by somebody and you can show that you are genuinely committed to this. It makes it a lot easier to recruit. So can I, yeah, just reinforce that. I've just sort of running through some of the things that I have benefited from working with. The first is just trainers. I think when you first decide as an organisation that you want to you want to improve the way that you're working, it's really helpful to talk to somebody from outside. I've listed the lady that we use, Jenny Child, who runs a company called Balance and Inclusion. She really specialises in this in the media sector, so inclusivity, sorry, in the media world. And there are loads and loads of trainers out there. They've all got their own speciality, but it is worth looking at that. There are lots of support groups, some of which will accredit you. So the sort of thing that Jack was talking about, two that I've worked with are the Ability People And in fact, we've put inclusivity, but it's includability. Charities, there are lots and lots of charities that really want to work with employers because they have got, you know, groups of people that they would love to support into the workplace. So I've listed two, but again, some of the ones that Gillian and Jack have listed are equally worth looking at. So the Down Syndrome Association has the WorkFit programme, and Ambitious About Autism is all about trying to support people into, or autistic people into the workplace. And the final thing that I thought was worth mentioning is professional associations. Now, you know, actually a lot of professionals, organisations realise the need to be better in this sort of thing. And so they are providing trainers, they are providing support. The two bodies I've listed here are both recruitment bodies, and both actually will give a lot of information. But a lot of other associations, I don't know, for example, Linky, whether any of the legal bodies can give advice on this sort of thing. So there's a lot of support out there from that sort of thing as well. And then finally, I just thought I would mention, just again, sort of on Jack's point, access to work, which is, it's not the same in that it's not sort of support in terms of telling you what you can do, but it's money, and that's useful. Jack knows. So the government will give up to, it's nearly 70,000 to help individuals work with their employer to adapt the workplace and improve the support to make employing them much easier. And that really, I mean, it's a great thing to know about, because I think it helps overcome the fear. So they're my points.
Thanks, Liz. The ones I was going to touch on, inevitably from a rather more legal perspective in terms of obligations, is the Government's Equalities Office. I think I showed this publication in one of our other seminars, and it looks at positive action in recruitment, because again, I think there's a bit of misunderstanding out there about the difference between positive action and positive discrimination, and employers are worried they're going to get it on the wrong line. This is a 10-page guide, and it's incredibly practical. It gives some really good examples, and it's worth a read. It's short and sweet. Again, we'll put it on our 21-day challenge. And likewise, you know, the Equality and Human Rights Commission have some fabulous publications. Go onto their website, just have a dig and a look around. There's some guidance on pre-employment health questionnaires, which we looked at previously, you know, what can you ask and when. But the website for the EHRC has got an awful lot of information. It's really practical. It's written in very clear terms. It gives examples, and I just think it's incredibly accessible. And the other organisation I wanted to touch on was ACAS, which is the sort of conciliation service, but it's also an advisory service directed at resolving workplace disputes and looking at advising employers on their obligations and employees on their rights. And again, the website is very accessible. I would highly recommend having a look at it. I'm just conscious of time. We said we'd talk for sort of 45, 50 minutes. We don't want to detain anyone too long. We were going to have a look at one of our earlier polls that we did, where your organisation is on the neurodiversity maturity model. But I think given the time, what we might do is rather roll out our 21-day challenge for those that want to participate. And then I think probably, Gillian, your idea was to let's have a look at the difference in the sort of statistics that we got when we first did this poll in seminar 1. As opposed to maybe after our 21-day challenge. It'll give us a reason to come back and discuss it further. So I think we'll leave it there for this morning, but thank you all to Gillian, Jack and Liz for participating. The next session we're going to do is to pick up all of your questions. So for those questions that we've had in, and please keep them coming in, we're going to organise them into sort of topics and try and address them individually, and we will then release that video to sort of wrap up all the outstanding questions we haven't had a chance to get to. But thank you so much for everybody and for your time, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.